Welcome to the Revenue Throughput Podcast. I'm your host, Jose Palomino, with an exciting episode today because our guest today is Eric Fogg, co-founder of MachineMetrics. And what Eric does, what his firm does, is he helps manufacturers from little ones to big ones, but a lot of attention toward that middle market, actually find ways to get increased ROI on the equipment they're operating today. It's cutting edge technology made very easy to use, and he'll talk about what they do with manufacturers, how they help, some case studies there, and also tell us a bit about his journey as an entrepreneur, as a business builder. So without further ado, let's welcome Eric to our show. Well, welcome Eric to the Revenue Throughput Podcast.
Thanks, Jose. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, one thing that I mentioned in the pre-show was simply that we like to interview a variety of industry experts, people who really focus on marketing or strategy or sales execution, things related to revenue. But we also love to have founders and owner-operators of companies in the B2B space on our show to share a little bit more of their journey from an owner-to-owner point of view. Most of our listenership tend to be B2B business owners. So we were very excited about you because I think what you do in your company, I'll let you describe it in a second, is very relevant to a lot of people listening because they're involved in manufacturing. So with that as an intro, Eric, tell us what you do and who you do it for.
Yeah, so very simply what we do is we connect to machine manufacturing and machine assets, whether they're discrete manufacturing assets, process manufacturing assets. So basically machines that just make stuff, whether they make individual things or make big batches of things. We connect up to those machines. We've gotten very good at that. We take that data, we forward it up to the cloud where we have a lot of out-of-the-box dashboards, reporting, analytics, all sorts of different cloud tools that customers can use to go through that data, help them make better decisions, whether they're operational decisions, purchasing decisions, staffing decisions, and help customers integrate that data into all sorts of other best-in-class software. So, ERP systems, maintenance management systems. We build deep integrations into all those platforms to help enrich those platforms with more data and reduce the amount of time that people are manually entering data into all these disparate software systems.
So at first glance, as I hear that, and I think some of our listeners might think this as well, that sounds like really good if I'm running Boeing or something really big and massive and so on. Is the world of analytics for manufacturing really just a province of the very big, well-entrenched modern manufacturers, or does it apply as well to those who might be in the middle market or contract manufacturers?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's actually something that the very large top tier companies have been doing in some way or another for a while, maybe not in a way that's as easy as it is now. Like with all technology, the big companies, they'll be early adopters, they'll build their own thing, they'll spend tens of millions of dollars setting up a software system to get a piece of data down to them. What we are part of, I think, is a new movement in the industry and the next step of that technology where we make that available at an inexpensive price to mid-market, lower market. And that's where most of our customers are. We have customers that have 2-3 machines, all the way up to customers that have thousands of machines. But I would say our average customer probably has 30-40 machines, something like that. So we work really well with small companies. And, I think our system really is plug and play. And that's kind of the big software innovation. So you don't need, PLC programmers, software developers, coders to implement this system. You can just buy it, hook it up to your machines. It's all based in the cloud, so you can just start using it right away.
Wow, so it's interesting you mentioned not needing these other talent pools like PLC programmers and things like that, which can be very expensive to even think about doing. So let's say somebody's running, a $5-8 million contract manufacturer. They have a client base, some big companies, some small companies, and they do pretty well for themselves. What kind of leverage would technology like yours give that operation? Like what other than, I'll have a cleaner dashboard, a cleaner report, but what can I do with it that would be a business outcome of having your platform versus doing whatever I'm doing now with spreadsheets and tick boards and things like that.
Yeah, there are kind of a few major business outcomes with a long tail of all sorts of unique ways that our customers use our system that blow our minds every day. We're like, you used our system to do what? Um, but the biggest is the simplest, and it's not very sexy, but it's utilization tracking. So we've found, having been in this industry, and we've been really surprised when we start working with customers, we ask them, what do you think the utilization of your equipment is? And from shops of, just a few $1 million all the way up to $1 billion shops, they often give us similar answers, which is, we think, these machines, they're maybe 70%. Those machines are probably 80 or 90%. I think they run a lot. A few machines over there, they're probably at 50%. We hook up our system and we gather all of that data directly from the controls. We're getting very accurate data, down to the second, actually accurate even less than a second resolution. And after running for a month or so, we often find that their perceived notion of utilization is way off. So we amalgamated all of our customers' response to that first question, which is just under 80%. I think it was 79 point something percent was the average utilization.
That was their perception
Was
of what.
there, yeah. So all customers, all average, thought that their utilization was 79 and some change percent.
Okay.
Actual, after 60 days of being connected to MachineMetrics, is just under 30%. It's 29 and change. So there's this really huge gulf between where people think machines are at and where they're actually at. And there's a lot of use cases that come just from that realization. I remember a really early customer of ours when we were just a company of a few people. I was on site installing our hardware onto the machines. And I'm a big machine tool nerd, metalworking machines, so mills and lathes and things like that. And I always love to talk to customers about the machines that they're buying. They were installing a brand new machine, and I said, "Hey, are you buying?" And we started talking about the new machines they were buying, and they're so excited and kind of like geeking out on the cool technology that's inbound. And I said, "What's your biggest reason behind buying these new machines?" And the answer, kind of long story short, is we're capacity constrained.
Mm-hmm.
We're not making our orders. We're asking our operators on the floor, why aren't we making our orders? And they say, we don't have enough machines to make all the parts. Um, we hooked up MachineMetrics to all of those machines, and we found that the average utilization across that shop was in the teens.
Oh boy.
It was really low. Um, and that customer at that point froze all purchasing of new equipment and said, we need to focus on getting more out of what we've got now.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, they worked with us for over 3 years. They didn't buy a single machine, got their utilization up over 60%. And just in the past couple of years, they've been adding some more machines. Business has been really good for them. But they managed to more than double their business by just focusing on what they had, getting more efficient. Which it's like, what other industry can you do that, right? What other industry can you double your business just by paying more attention to what you're doing and trying to do it more efficiently?
So the impact on their balance sheet, from a capex point of view, is huge. Delaying purchases for 3 years, 4 years on equipment, and it also probably would have obscured the opportunities they had to improve other efficiencies. Obviously, operations need to be looked at. The workflows need to be looked at. It wasn't the machines, but the machines is an easy scapegoat. You ask a bunch of operators, why aren't you producing more for us? Well, these darn machines. If you give us new ones, we do better.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it's like anything, just with all of us, it's like we're so much of us are working remotely or even just in our daily work lives. You say, Jose, how productive were you today? And you may say, yeah, this morning I got off to a slow start. There might be some big, like 1 or 2 hour things that you can identify and say, yeah, those are problems. I was less efficient during those times. Turns out, as you can imagine, it's similar with machines that, yeah, about those things, but there's all these little 5, 10, 15-minute things that happen over the course of a day
Mm-hmm.
that never get recorded, that no one remembers because they're too small. But in combination, they're enormous, right? In combination, they're so much time. I think a lot of these companies, that's what they realize is they spend a lot of time focusing on these, kind of just like bright, sticks out like a sore thumb issues. But oftentimes those issues are really, really hard to solve. They take a lot of time. They maybe take CapEx. They take a lot of maybe executive talent, right? So you're taking people from the highest levels of the company and using them to try and solve these problems. That's very expensive for the organization. Where what we found is a lot of these 15-minute things, if you look at them and you say, wow, this month across our 40 machines, we lost 400 hours in little 10, 15-minute segments to this issue. And I know how to solve that issue, or I know how to solve preponderance of the the occasions of that issue. And that's where a software like ours and a lot of our customers start getting ROI even on day one, right? It's just like, wait, what's going on? The machine's taken how long to make the part? It shouldn't. Let me go out on the floor and figure that out. And oftentimes these things that just kind of lived under the surface pop right above it and ready to be solved.
Well, so one thing that comes to mind, just curious, right? So clearly, somebody selling new equipment may not exactly be, and I'm sure there's a counterpoint to this, but intuitively it would sound like they may not be celebrating the day their client or their prospect put in MachineMetrics because it stretches the effective life of the existing infrastructure. As you said, 80% on average is perception, 30% on average is reality. That's a big gulf to cover. Good for the manufacturer, good for the owner operator, not so good for the OEM selling them new equipment, at least not for the short term.
Yeah.
But the other stakeholder that might be affected and might have a different opinion, I'm just curious what you've discovered. What about the production line, the workers, who are, in modern manufacturing, are pretty skilled individuals. They're smart cats. They know what they're doing. How do they feel about, we're going to put in MachineMetrics and we're going to track what every machine does down to the sub-second productivity? What has been your perception about reactions to that initially and then over time?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, on the first half of the question, it is really interesting when it comes to machine builders, OEMs. They, most of them, though, I was actually surprised. And I asked them this point blank oftentimes, like, what do you think of this? And most of the times they say they love it. Our customers' success is our success in the long run. If we don't sell them a couple machines this year and next year, we'll sell them more in 5 years when they're really successful and really lean and mean and winning lots of new business because they're really that good. So a lot of the machine tool resellers do kind of see it more holistically and are playing the longer term game. So we don't see much friction there. But on the shop floor, yeah, you've absolutely identified an area of friction, right? A lot of the people working on the shop floor, they're like, I don't know, I don't know if I want to be monitored. There's a lot that happens that I don't know if I can portray through this. And that's what we work with our customers a lot to overcome. And we love to just tell stories of how to appropriately use the system. So we often tell our customers to, when they implement the system, talk to their team and say, really get across the line that this is a management tracking system, much more than it is an operator tracking system, right? It's like, this is a system that is letting us know how good of an environment we are creating for you on the floor to excel and produce as much as possible, and for us all to be a very competitive business. And then we really focus on ways that we can help the operator make their life easier. And there's a few stories that come to mind. I remember one time I was installing at another early customer when the company was young, and they had two brand new lathes and two really, really old lathes, all making the same part. And so I'm like hooking up the old lathes and talking to the operators. I'm like, what do you guys think of these things? They're like 20 years old. And they're like, oh, we hate these things. They're breaking all the time. They're such a pain in the butt. We're always working on them. Management's always upset because we're behind on an order or something like that. And it's because of these darn machines. And, you talk to management about it and they're like, those machines were paid for, 15 years ago. Every dollar they make me now is printing money, right? I don't want to get rid of them until the very last minute. So I said to the operators, in MachineMetrics, we have the ability to categorize your downtime. So when the machine goes down, the operators can select on a little tablet that's placed at the machine, why is the machine down? So I told the operators, every time you're here fixing this machine, make sure to do a good job to categorize that downtime. And that's a great way to communicate to management what's really going on with these machines. Because you can say, all day long, like, I think we should replace these machines. And management's going to be like, of course you do. But dollars, cents, parts created, that's the language that is very hard to ignore. So they started categorizing their downtimes. And I think it was like a month and a half later, the order for 2 new lathes was placed,
Okay.
right? Because the owner saw in that downtime, they're like, we're losing how much time fixing these things? Like, get them out.
And
So
that
that's,
time's not free. It's those are very skilled workers that have to work on that machine. You're waiting for the technician, whoever has to come in. The part has to be ordered. It's a continuous thing. It's actually a money pit. So the idea that it was paid for 15 years ago, well, in a way, yes, the original payment, but you're paying in the installment plan going forward now all these
yeah,
repairs.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And once that kind of took place, these two operators that ran this little cell of lathes became huge MachineMetrics lovers, right? And they start going out on the shop floor and they're like, if you've got a tool that's messed up or a process or something that you've been asking for help with, and not getting a lot of play from it, use MachineMetrics as a way to communicate. So what'll happen usually is that a few operators will start seeing that this system is a great way to communicate, and then word spreads across the shop floor, and more and more people take it on, and it kind of spreads like wildfire that way a little bit.
Wow. Well, Eric, I mean, it's clear you have a passion for this topic. You have a passion for helping manufacturers be more productive, and you've done it. And you've gone hands on. You've really done the work. So, I'd like to just maybe shift a little bit on this discussion towards how MachineMetrics came to be. How did you get involved with it? What was there a light bulb moment? And is the company today doing what it set out to do? Or like a lot of other companies that started with X, you end up doing Y, and Y is better. Be very interesting to hear just like kind of your journey.
Yeah, yeah. I started off in my little segment of manufacturing in high school. I went to a technical high school and took a machine shop class so I could have something to talk with my dad about because he worked at a machine shop when he came back from Vietnam. That was the only reason I took the class. Like I wasn't even that interested in it, but immediately fell in love with it and started working in local machine shops around where I grew up. Started off packing boxes and just hungry to learn more, and worked my way up and taught myself to program 5-axis milling machines, which is a pretty kind of standard aerospace milling platform that's used a lot to make parts, metal parts. Um, had my own machine shop for a good amount of time doing mostly prototyping work and things. Um, and then got into a lot of Six Sigma lean consulting. And especially through the recession, that's kind of how I was keeping food on my table, was working with machine shops doing lean consulting and looking at their processes, helping them with programming their machines and stuff like that. And while doing that, I kind of realized a little bit of the story that we just covered, that I would be brought in to talk about leaning out a very specific process on a machine or a very specific pain point that was identified, kind of those sore thumb moments.
Mm-hmm.
And I would be working on the shop floor, trying to figure this out and just kind of looking around and like, there's a lot of idle machines in here. And I started asking my customers, like, what's the utilization of your equipment? And they would tell me, and I would say, how do you know? Because just from being on your floor this week, it doesn't feel that way to me. I certainly don't doubt your numbers, but that's not the impression that I'm getting. And I'm spending all this time, squeezing 4 minutes out of a 40-minute cycle time where there's all these machines just sitting idle.
Mm.
Um, and that's kind of when I started to think, there's got to be a way to get this data right from the machine control, and then we can find out. So I started down that path a little bit, and the more I thought about it, the more I thought, there's a business here, maybe a
There's a there
software
there, right?
business. Like let's teach the world like what's going on with these machines. But I knew I wasn't the person to build a software business. It's just not my forte. So I started looking around and met a guy in my local area who had just successfully sold a software company that he started in his basement and grew quite large. And he had a manufacturing and industry background as well. I joined forces with him about 6.5 years ago. And we founded the company, and kind of the rest is history.
Wow. So you were employee one effectively, right? And then he was employee two, and
Yeah, yeah, we're both one. Yeah, we're
and so now you had mentioned before in the pre-interview that you've actually have people working rather remotely, partly in response to the pandemic. But is that like the new normal for you?
yeah. I mean, I think we've got an office, a headquarters in Western Massachusetts that people come into, but we have no requirement that anybody come in. Remote work is totally fine with us, and in fact, we've gotten quite good at it as a company, and have found in some ways we can be a lot more efficient with remote work. It certainly has its downsides. There's kind of fewer collisions that happen amongst your staff, and sharing of ideas that might happen if they're sitting next to each other. And it takes a little bit of getting creative to try and create virtual environments for those collisions to happen. But there are a lot of other ways in which you're more efficient. And a lot of that is just focus. I think everyone is a lot more focused working from home than in the office, where there's a lot of distractions and just side conversations and uh,
Yeah,
hanging
it's
out around the
interesting because
coffee.
there's some large, I won't get into the name because that isn't my point, but there's some large software companies in the news recently about really enforcing salary differentials for people who want to work from home and not go into their offices.
Mm.
And I thought about that. I said, wow, like if it's working, first of all, are the people productive? That's the number one issue. Can they do the job? And then B, it seems like you, in the long run, you will need less office space. So there's a financial impact there that's positive for a company. But how have you been able to, as still a smaller company, right? So I know you've grown extensively from when you started the business, but still would fall in the category of SMB, which a lot of our listeners would fall into that category. How did you go about creating the right culture, because you have to be in a creative space. Your organization has to be responsive to customers, creative. I'm sure competition is an issue. How do you create that culture intentionally, or you just set the stage, or do you have explicit things? I'm just kind of curious about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's certainly very difficult. I think the biggest driver for us is a shared commitment and excitement around the type of work we're doing. I think we see manufacturing as a blue ocean of opportunity for innovation. We think that there's a lot of just fundamental things about the world that could get a lot better when manufacturing kind of gets modernized a lot more. And I think amongst our whole team, everyone's really driven by that and really excited by that. And we attract people who get really excited to be a part of that. So I think that really drives people to always be thinking a little bit in the back of their minds, about the bigger picture, what problems we're really trying to solve for our customers, and then apply that to the work they're doing and bring up ideas. And then I think the second half of that is, the weighing between like, did this really need to be a meeting?
Okay.
Question that everyone always fights with, right? It's just like you have the Zoom meeting where you're talking about something, and it's like this could have been an email, this could have been a Slack or Microsoft Teams message. But I've learned when working with a team, that a lot of those still, especially if you can kind of create a more innovative light in that meeting, that they're still totally worth it. And take that meeting, try and minimize the amount of time that you're spending solving the actual problem, or reducing the expectation that that problem is even going to be solved on that meeting, because it's probably not. The value in these conversations is what you're saying: creativity and innovation, and seeing what can bubble up. Like, what's plan C, what's plan D, what's the thing that we haven't thought of yet to help solve this problem for a customer or create a really killer new feature. And I found it works really well. It's really surprising, but it's like you get passionate people in a room, on a Zoom meeting, on a phone call together. It doesn't really matter what it is, and those ideas start to hit, and it's really fun to just kind of see it happen organically.
Yeah, and it just goes to show you that although we have to be productive in an organization, we're not machines, not literally. So
Yeah,
there's a human factor side, which is a little softer and might not be as efficient, but in the long run could be more productive just because you give people an opportunity to just share an idea, and they need those opportunities. So that's great that you've built that into your business there, Eric. So Eric, we're just about out of time on this interview. I'm sure people are going to be listening and saying, "Boy, I'd like to learn more about this." So where should they go to find out more about you, about your business, about what you do for manufacturers across a wide range of industries?
Yeah, you can check us out at MachineMetrics.com. It's pretty much everything you need to find there. Lots of resources, videos, case studies. You can reach out to various teams, our marketing team, our sales team, if you're interested. You can also just find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty easy to find there. I usually respond to messages if you want to, chats. If there's anything I can help with or anything you want to chat about, I'm always open to making new connections.
Fantastic. Eric Fogg, thank you so much for being part of the Revenue Throughput podcast. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.